Welcome to a new program about better automated acceptance testing using Serenity BDD and the Screenplay pattern. I'm John Ferguson Smart, and today we'll be learning about what the Screenplay pattern is and how it can help you write better automated acceptance tests. First of all, let's see what we're going to talk about. We're going to look at what exactly the Screenplay pattern is, how you can use it, why you would use it, when you should use it, and also how it will work. In a nutshell, Screenplay is a design pattern that can help you write more readable and more maintainable automated acceptance tests. It's typically used for acceptance or integration testing of complex systems such as web applications or REST APIs, or combinations of these. While it may seem overkill for the simple examples we're going to be looking at, the Screenplay pattern makes writing larger test suites for more complicated applications, real-world applications, significantly easier and faster. It makes it easier to scale. It makes it easier to bring people on board. It makes it easier to train these people, get them working very, very quickly. And it also, when we use it with Serenity, it gives great reporting and living documentation. Let's see what the Screenplay pattern is made up of. First of all, the Screenplay pattern is an actor-centric system. It's based around the user experience model, where we have actors who have goals. They want to achieve certain things. So here we have an actor called Petra, who is a pet owner, and her goal is that she wants to find a place that she can put her pet for when she goes away on holiday. So that's her goal. Actors also can have abilities. So Petra might be able to browse her web, or she might be able to interact with a REST interface or some other system. Now, to achieve her goals, Petra can perform certain tasks. Actors perform tasks if they want to achieve their goals. In this case, Petra might want to perform the task of booking her pet into a pet hotel. The tasks are business level concepts. They're not concerned with whether we're trying to interact with a UI, interact with a web service, interact with a RESTful service or a REST API. It's not really the concern here. The concern at this level, I want to book my pet into a pet hotel, is purely the business task that we're trying to achieve, perform to achieve our business goal. To achieve these tasks, Petra's going to need to interact with the application. She's going to need to find a pet hotel online. She's going to need to enter the details of her pet to make a booking and so forth. We say that to achieve a task, an actor uses her abilities that we talked about earlier on to interact with the system and to perform the tasks. Finally, an actor needs to be able to look at the system and see whether the system is in the state that she's expecting. So Petra will want to be able to look at the system, look at the application, and see whether the booking has actually gone through. In general, we say that actors can ask questions about the state of the system, and they use these questions to test their assumptions or to check their expectations about what the results or the outcomes should be. Let's walk through these concepts with some real code and see what advantages they bring to the table. As always, you'll learn better if you follow along as we go. We'll continue with our vet clinic application. You can find the starting point for this example in the vet clinic sample project in the Carter Screenplay Basics Start branch. So I'm going to check that out now. Git checkout Carter Screenplay Basics Start. And now we have our starting point for our project. Now suppose we need to write a test that illustrates how Petra, a pet owner, would book her pet into a pet hotel. When we use Screenplay, we try and express tests as user journeys through the system that show how a user would use the application to achieve a goal that is important to them. We find this sort of test gives you more bang for your buck when you're writing acceptance tests, and helps acceptance tests play their role as a form of functional documentation of your system. So I'm going to start off by writing a test class that encapsulates this idea of booking a pet into a hotel, and I'm just going to call it booking a pet into a hotel. I'm going to start by creating a new class. Now, since I'm using Screenplay and Serenity BDD in this test, I'm going to have to go to the POM file of my Maven project, and I'm going to add some dependencies for Serenity. So I'm going to add Serenity Core. I'm going to use the latest version. I'm going to add another dependency on Serenity Screenplay, again with the latest version, and then I'm going to add one on Serenity JUnit because we'll be running with JUnit. Now, to make this cleaner, what I'm going to do is take these version numbers and have a Serenity version property as part of my Maven build, and that way I can replace these. So I could do a search replace, but just to show you how we could do it in IntelliJ, we go Serenity version, and then we can just do the same thing for these other ones. The first thing I'm going to do is tell IntelliJ and JUnit that this is a Screenplay Serenity runner. So I'm going to go run with Serenity runner. And that way Serenity will do its magic when we run the reports and run the test, and we'll get some nice reports. Now let's write our test. Our first test is to do with when Petra books her cat into the hotel. So I'm just going to create a class or a method called something like Petra books her pet cat into the hotel. And what we want to do here is we want to have Petra book her cat into a hotel, and we want to check that the hotel has her cat registered as a guest. How would we write that as code? Well, first of all, we're going to need to identify Petra. Now, Petra is an actor. So we've got net Serenity BDD Screenplay actor as where that's coming from. And we can create her with a builder type method where we provide her name that will appear in the report. So we say Petra the pet owner. I find it useful to have names, mnemonic names that start with the letter of the role of the person or the actor that's playing the role. So Petra the pet owner, Barry the business administrator, Harry the hotel administrator, and so forth. So this is part of the given section of our test where we are preparing our test data. Petra is also going to need a pet cat, so we'll need to add a pet cat called Ginger, which is the name of her cat. Finally, we're going to need a hotel. And that's all we need to get started with our test. We can now get to the actual action, but we don't know what we're going to do there yet. So we're going to go straight to the then and figure out what our assertions are. So remember, given is where we set up our test data, when is where we do our act under test, then is where we check the outcomes. Let's run this test to check that it fails. And we have a failing test because we're expecting a cat called Ginger, but we got an empty collection. This is exactly what we expect. So how can we fill this last line in? How can we represent the actor Petra booking Ginger into the hotel? Now, a traditional approach might do something like this. We could say Petra books her pet Ginger into the hotel, pet hotel. Unfortunately, we can't implement this method here because it belongs to the actor class, which is part of the Screenplay library. We could extend the actor class and have our own actor, and then add a whole lot of methods that are associated with what Petra could do to this actor. And this would be a little bit like the traditional Serenity steps libraries, if you've ever seen them. The problem with this approach is that the actor class would tend to get very big. We would have every single thing that Petra could do. And then we come into the problem, what do we do about things that Petra can also do with shared with other actors? How would we enable another project to use the tasks that Petra could do? So in Screenplay, we use a different approach. Rather than saying Petra does a particular action, we separate the actor from the task she can do. We do this with the attempts to method, which takes a sequence of performables. Now, a performable is how we encapsulate a business task or a user interaction of some kind. It's a way of enabling us to focus the description of how the actor does something and to reuse it anywhere in a project or even between projects and between teams. This is the heart of the Screenplay pattern, and it's what makes it so powerful, this idea of separating the actor from the actions that she can do. In this case, the task will be to check in a pet into the hotel. Let's see how this might work. Now, a check-in is simply a Java class like any other. So I'm going to create a check-in object. I'm going to pass in Ginger. I'm also going to pass in the pet hotel. And now I'm going to create this class. I'll put it in a special package called tasks to identify the business tasks. And we can see here, we doesn't need to extend anything. It implements the performable method. And if we implement this method, we can see that the only method that it uses is one called performs as. And this is the essence of all performables. That's where all the action happens. The actor performs an action on some objects that have been passed in. In this case, it's very simple. We're going to remember we're going to call this the pet and not Ginger. Likewise here. What does the actor do? All we need to do is say pet hotel check-in pet, and that's the heart of our action. Let's go back to our test and run it and see what happens. So now it passes. Now that we have the test passing, let's revisit this code and see if we can refactor it to make it a little bit more readable. After all, Petra attempts to new check-in Ginger Pet Hotel is not the most readable code in the world, and Serenity Screenplay has a great deal of support for making your reports extremely readable if you play the game properly, if you use the idiomatic Serenity techniques to build your tasks. And one of them is to use builders instead of new operations. So we could say check in a pet. That will give us a bit of flexibility later on. And we're going to say check into the pet hotel. Now, obviously, this will no longer compile because a pet doesn't exist. We're going to have to create a method, and we're going to get this method to return a check-in builder because we're building our pet in two stages. First of all, we're going to create the builder. Now, we don't know what the builder looks like yet, of course, but we're going to create it. An inner class should be fine, but we will want to make it public because we want the other methods to be accessible. And now, if we go back into, this is where we actually generate the object. And we say we return a performable, and that's fine. And to implement this method, we're going to say return new check-in, and we're going to give it a pet and a pet hotel. And now this will be exactly the same as before. We can run this again and it should pass. And that's awesome. And this will work fine, but if we want to get the most out of Serenity's reporting capabilities, we need to do a little bit more. Serenity lets you report in a blow-by-blow way down to the tasks and interactions and actions on how a particular task is performed and what the actor has to do with the screenshots and the JSON traffic and so forth. But to do that, we need to add a little bit of extra help. We need to let Serenity instrument the task objects. And so when Serenity instruments it, it can monitor what's going on whenever methods are called, and it will be able to report on them correctly. So rather than saying return new check-in, we use a Serenity method, return instrumented instance of, and then we pass the class that we need. It's a check-in. And then we're going to give it the properties that it needs. It needs a pet and a pet hotel. And that's exactly the equivalent of what we've just had. That will return an instrument version of the class for Serenity to use. The other thing we need to do is to modify the perform as a little bit. Now, this is fairly simple. All we need to do is add the special step annotation and to pass it in a parameter. The parameter is a text string or string that describes the text that will appear in the report for this step. And there are a couple of notations that we use. We could just use checks in pet to the hotel, but that'd be a bit boring because we've got all this information here that we can use. We have the pet hotel, and we have the actor. So we could say something like this. 0 is the notation for the first parameter of the string, so the actor. So we say 0 checks in, and we're going to say another special notation, pet. So this hash pet will find the pet variable, and similarly, so checks in, actually let's say checks pet into pet hotel. So now, in summary, we've got the instrumented method in when we actually generate the task, and we have the step annotation. Let's go back and run this test again, and then have a look at the reports that it generates. So I'm going to go into the target site Serenity directory. This directory contains a number of subdirectories and an HTML, a JSON, and an XML, and that's what was produced by our test result. If I open this file, we can get the actual Serenity report. Now, the thing to look at here is that we have, when checking into the pet hotel, that's the name of our test class, Petra books her pet cat into the hotel. That's our scenario or test case. Now, here's the interesting bit. Petra, the pet owner, that's the name of our pet owner, checks a cat called Ginger, so that's the name of our animal, our pet, into, now we have Serenity Labs tutorial, blah, 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 pet hotel, the toString of the pet hotel. We can see here that we haven't named our hotel, we haven't given a toString on our hotel, and that's an exercise I'll leave you to do. Add a sensible toString method to the hotel, rerun the report, and see what it generates. So in summary, what we've seen here is how to implement a very simple screenplay test where we've got an actor, a pet, and a pet hotel. Petra, the actor, attempts to check in a pet Ginger into the pet hotel, so this is the heart of the screenplay pattern. Then we're just doing an ordinary assert. In the next tutorial, we'll have a look at how to take these assertions a little bit further and use not assertions, but questions. So, this is John Smart signing off and looking forward to seeing you in the next Serenity Screenplay tutorial.